Once upon a time, IBS used to cripple me. Fighting it was a constant battle, and with the risk of being or sounding melodramatic, it nearly ruined my life. Thankfully, I'm well rid of it now. IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, nervous stomach, irritable bowel, irritable colon, call it what you like. It's all the same. Awful. It left me feeling frustrated, exhausted, depressed, and, at times, just plain angry. But today, I can confidently say that these things are all a thing of the past. When it all began. Now that I'm IBS free, I've managed to get my life on track. But this hasn't always been the case. It first hit me at college during my exams. Terrible timing. But not really that much of a surprise when you think about it. Thinking back to when IBS really began to rear its ugly head, stress and assignment deadlines were constantly hanging over me. In retrospect, after everything I've learned since becoming IBS free, it was an accumulation of things that contributed to my deteriorating health, stress being just one of them. But still, I had no idea what was going on with me. Back then, I guess I just put it all down to those exam nerves. Wouldn't you? Food slowly started to become my mortal enemy. Without going into too many unpleasant and graphic details, it either disagreed with me and went straight through me, or bloated me to the point where I sometimes appeared pregnant. My typical diet was that usual student diet, the kind that was ridiculously high in carbs, lots of grease, salt galore. Basically, I ate anything sweet and stodgy, as you do in your college years. But that wasn't anything new. I'd been eating like that for some time. Partying was also the norm. It wouldn't really be college if it were any different, right? But like I said, my diet hadn't really given me any grief up until that point. Bang. Just like that, it came from nowhere. Even now that I don't suffer from IBS anymore, I can vividly remember the physical and emotional turmoil my body went through time and time again. Mild cramps that turned into gut-wrenching ones. Thank God I finally said goodbye to these IBS symptoms once and for all a while back. I always thought that I had a high pain threshold, but the first time I really suffered from it properly, I knew all about it. I remember buckling over with the worst cramps I'd ever experienced. I have no words to really describe how it felt. At times, it felt like a knife had been stabbed into my stomach and twisted around ever so slowly. I ended up going to the campus doctor. He sent me home, told me to drink more fluids and stop worrying. Exam stress, he said. Stop worrying? How? Easier said than done. I guess he didn't remember how he felt at medical school when his entire future was riding on a few hours in an exam room. Luckily, I haven't had to see a doctor for any IBS-related symptoms for years now, which I'm grateful for, as I felt like I had a medical loyalty card at one point, which would give me X points for every visit. If loyalty cards for doctor's visits were actually a thing, I'd have certainly racked up a fair few points. Next, another doctor put it down to bad menstrual cramps and put me on the contraceptive pill to try and control it better. It didn't work. And then this happened. 2 days before my exams, I found myself in bed, writhing in pain and suffering from diarrhea. Despite not having experienced such excruciating pain in years, it's all still very vivid. You just can't unforget some things. Every few minutes, I found myself in the bathroom, afraid if I moved, I'd have a very embarrassing mishap, which, of course, was the last thing any college student wanted. Imagine! Again, I found myself back in the doctor's surgery, staring at the sterile white walls, trying to blink back tears, and begging him to fix me so I could do my exams. The same doctor as the last time gave me Imodium and told me to rest up. Needless to say, those exams didn't go so well. I listened to the doctors and wrote it all off as performance anxiety. They were the experts after all. They knew best. Ironically, it wasn't a doctor that eventually treated my IBS for good. Making acquaintances with doctors. After the whole college experience, I did see a number of different doctors with my various symptoms. The exams were well and truly over, and by some miracle, I passed them all and got the results I needed. But I was still experiencing strained gut sensations, lethargy, and uncomfortable pain. I couldn't blame those exam nerves anymore. Something wasn't right. They all said the same thing, that I was the only one that could measure the symptoms, because unlike a simple sore throat that could be easily diagnosed by simply looking in the mouth and seeing redness and inflammation, and possibly even some minuscule white spots on your tonsils, my symptoms were broad and, as most of the doctors said, immeasurable from a medical standpoint. How I nearly lost my firm tens of thousands of dollars. Fast forward a few years when I was working in a busy advertising firm. I loved my job, and I was good at what I did. I was slowly working my way up, and there were even whispers that I'd one day make partner, which of course is every person's dream in the world of advertising and marketing. We worked with some major clients and big name brands, so the office was always buzzing. Over the years, I learned not to get starstruck by some of the famous faces that walked in our doors, and I'd go as far as saying that I was in my dream job. One day, in a board meeting, as I was listening to our director pitch a new project idea to one of our long-standing clients, who also happened to be a Hollywood actor and director, I felt a sharp pain run across my stomach. It took me by surprise. I grabbed onto my stomach. I may have even gasped. The room went black, and I could hear people buzzing around me. My stomach bloated, and I felt like it could explode at any moment. I remember the director's PA giving me some water and asking me if I were okay. I can't remember what I mumbled back, but I do recall the looks of horror in the sea of very important faces that were sitting around that table. I made a quick exit, without explanation, and ran to the bathroom. It was at that stage my boss said to me I needed to get to a doctor quick. He cared. I knew he did. He was also thinking about work. Now that I'm 100% healthy again, I completely understand where he was coming from. Having fewer people on board and having to hire temps could have potentially cost our company thousands, if not millions, of dollars. Thankfully, our client was a loyal one, and we were still able to get him on board. I'd been lying to myself. Honestly, I had been burying my head in the sand. Obviously, now that I don't suffer from any of these awful symptoms anymore, it's easy for me to say. But I really was petrified of what the doctors were going to tell me. I replayed the worst case scenarios in my head over and over again. I sat in front of another doctor yet again. I was pale and slightly yellow, almost jaundice, holding my stomach and trying not to cry. He nodded his head knowingly as I listed my symptoms. Pain, excruciating pain at times. Cramps, much worse than any monthly female ones. Bloating and constipation, sometimes so bad my stomach felt like it had tripled in size. Diarrhea. This came and went. It was almost as if I alternated between being constipated and having diarrhea at times. Over the years, this had become more frequent, but I just hadn't ever properly addressed it since my college years. Fatigue was a massive one. I'd always been a bit of a night owl, but my body struggled to stay up late. All of these symptoms wreaked havoc on my personal life. I barely went out in a social capacity, and at times I became a recluse, isolating myself more. This obviously led to even more things, such as depression, panic attacks, and anxiety. I had many sleepless nights. I relayed everything to the doctor, hoping he'd give me an answer. He did. But first he asked me to rank my pain. There were 2 different types of criteria he worked on. Rome criteria, this gauged the pain and discomfort I felt in my abdomen, and Manning criteria. This gauged the pain and discomfort I experienced when I was either constipated or passing stools. I gave him my honest answer. They were high numbers. IBS, he said quickly. It looks like irritable bowel syndrome. However, he could not be 100% sure, since there is no actual formal diagnosis or tests for IBS. Do you know that feeling of relief? No pun intended, trust me. Relief is what I felt at that very moment. Relief that someone was finally able to put a name to what I had. Although I'm even more relieved now that I don't have to worry about any of this at all. I think I may have even smiled through the pain at the moment. I wasn't even sure I knew what it was. I definitely heard of people having it before, though. My gym instructor, who was in her late 40s, was as slim and as fit as could be. She often complained about her IBS flare-ups, as she would call them. There were times when I even had to do a double take. She often appeared pregnant out of nowhere. So what's the solution? How do I fix this? My questions were innocent enough and quite normal considering I was in a place where most people would expect to receive some sort of an answer. It was like a slap around the face. "There is no cure," the doctor replied in a very matter-of-fact way. "Excuse me?" I shrieked. He went on and on. I zoned in and out. I tried to force myself to listen and pay attention to what he was saying, because I'm sure something that he was saying must have been of value. He was a medical practitioner after all. But those words kept ringing in my ears. There is no cure. All of a sudden, I forgot my stomach cramps and nauseating pain. I felt sickness of another kind. I wanted to desperately throw up. "No, no, no, no," my voice screamed at me inside. "No! But there are ways you can manage it." Honestly, if only I knew what I know now and could have been free from the shackles of IBS long ago. I couldn't believe what I heard next. Apparently, there were ways to manage it. Change your diet. I nodded solemnly, although admittedly my eating habits were far better than my college years when I lived on takeouts, pasta, and beer. I considered my diet to be quite healthy. He didn't tell me what I should do to it, though. Cut out alcohol, or at least limit it. I breathed in. Of course a doctor was going to say that. Take laxatives for the constipation and Imodium for your diarrhea. That was like an oxymoron. He was telling me to take two drugs that basically triggered two of my major IBS. I was so glad I had a name for it, finally. Symptoms. It didn't make sense. But he was the doctor. He knew best. Who was I to disagree with his 6+ years of medical school? Relax. I really wish doctors would stop telling me that. If it were that easy to sit back and take it easy, we'd be living in a hippie-type world and wearing flowers in our hair. Needless to say, I think I was left with even more questions than answers. The truth about IBS. I just don't think doctors get it. Well, how can they if they've never experienced the pain, discomfort, tiredness, and not to mention the sheer embarrassment themselves? The honest truth is that IBS can turn your world upside down, and it can also catch you off guard. So I discovered the hard and embarrassing way. When it strikes, it can mess up and disrupt everything going on in your life. IBS doesn't care if you're in the middle of a multi-million-dollar deal. It doesn't care if you're on the sideline watching your kids play Little League. It doesn't care if you're on a second date with someone. It really doesn't care at all. If that's not bad enough, it also affects you in different ways, even between your episodes. Once officially diagnosed, if you can call it that without any real tests, I found myself feeling anxious all the time. When is it going to strike next? That was why I found the doctor's advice to stop stressing out to be a bit ironic. I felt like it was impossible to enjoy life like it should be enjoyed. I certainly couldn't relax. In fact, I'm almost certain that my constant worrying also negatively impacted my condition even more. IBS changed me. I wish I could say that my initial confirmation from the doctors gave me comfort, but it didn't. I couldn't see how taking both laxatives and Imodium could help me, nor could I see how I could relax more and stop stressing when I had no idea when it was going to catch me out again. I did seek second and third opinions, but they all pretty much gave me the same advice. In the next year or so, the situation got even worse. Sometimes I'd be off work 3 or 4 days in a row. I'd lock myself in my room in total darkness, praying that it would quickly pass. I lost friends because of my IBS. It's not because they weren't supportive of me. It was because I just couldn't face going out in the real world. I went where I had to go and then headed immediately home. I'd cancel on friends and family at the last minute. I'd turn down invites. And not surprisingly, the calls, messages, and invites slowly began to cool off. My career suffered too. Forget the day when I had to run out of the boardroom holding onto my stomach in agony. That day was just one of many. And because I'd had no cure, it meant that I still had IBS. Chronic fatigue set in. As a result, my productivity suffered too, to the point that I was hauled in front of my boss and asked if I had some dependency issues. I think he was referring to drugs or alcohol. To be fair, I'd lost weight, looked pale, and had permanent dark rings under my eyes. I wasn't a pretty sight. I explained that I'd been diagnosed with IBS, but this meant nothing to him. He had a business to run. I got a formal warning. I got a written warning. I lost my job. The tipping point. Losing my job was a bit of a reality check. I guess I could have fought it. I possibly could have sued them. But what was the point? I had to figure out I needed to take control back. Because who in their right mind would ever employ me in such a state? I wouldn't. Desperation sunk in. No way was I going to pump myself up with concoctions of laxatives, Imodium, and antidepressants. I joined every IBS forum I could find. I spent hours chatting on Facebook to people that were also suffering from it. Some people had it even worse off than me. There were some that had lost their homes and their families. How could one condition that some stated wasn't even a proper medical condition cause so many problems and wreck so many lives? I'm just so thankful that I have a happy ending to my story and my IBS has well and truly gone. Unfortunately, there are so many other people out there that can't say the same, because just like I had once done, they rely solely on the advice of doctors. The triggers. To say I became a little obsessed in ridding myself of this condition is an absolute understatement. All you had to do was go into my computer history to see what I mean. Some friendly people online had been experimenting with treating their triggers. What did I have to lose? Surely, focusing on the triggers could at least minimize my flare-ups. Doing this could help me get back on track with everything. I was desperate to try and rebuild my life. What I had learned about IBS was not one size fits all. Every single person is different, and what might trigger my IBS could be something completely different for someone else. Unfortunately, it wasn't as easy as the doctors made it out to be. Dieting. One thing many doctors told me was to change my diet. They told me to eliminate things, but they didn't tell me what to remove. I had no idea about how to eliminate and then re-add. Was it a matter of going cold turkey with certain foods? I had no clue. So while the medical experts' advice sounded good and made sense to me in theory, it was difficult to put into practice without guidance. So I took it upon myself to try almost every diet I could find online that came up when I tapped the words diet for IBS. High-fiber diets, low-fiber diets, low-fat diets, the ketogenic diet, a gluten-free diet, and a low FODMAP diet were just some of the diets I attempted and failed at. Nothing seemed to work. Again, if I were armed with the information about how to get rid of IBS back then, things would have been completely different. A random online encounter changed my life. I lose count now as to how many online groups and forums I joined. However, one thing for sure was that these were the groups that I regularly and still do interact with. The difference now is that I'm often the one giving advice and pointing people towards the things that can change their lives. On particularly bad days, I send public pleas for help and advice. I wanted to know anything and everything that has worked for other IBS sufferers. Julissa contacted me on a random Saturday morning. She'd seen a post that I'd written, the post that referred to doctors telling me to eliminate things from my diet without giving me any details as to how to do it. Elimination was the right answer. She explained to me her family's personal experience with IBS and how elimination had worked for her niece. But it all had to be done in a systematic way. Otherwise, the elimination process would be a fruitless exercise. She definitely had my attention. How I became IBS-free in literally no time at all. Apparently, I didn't need long to reduce and perhaps get rid of some or all of my IBS symptoms. I'd been fighting these symptoms for years. For the longest of times, I didn't even know I had IBS. I'd even lost the job that I'd absolutely loved because I just couldn't get on top of things, which included my mental health. This short period of time for healing myself, compared to the countless days of anguish that I'd previously experienced, was a drop in the ocean, and something I was 100% willing to have a go at. There were rules to be followed to get the answers I was looking for, which I did, and what I found out shocked me. 1. I learned that there were a few foods that set my IBS off. They were not dairy or wheat products like I'd originally thought or had been told. 2. I discovered I've always been quite an anxious person, long before my IBS problems. The IBS just exasperated everything. I learned that I couldn't cure it, but I sure as hell could get it under control so I didn't have to suffer from it on a day-to-day basis like I had been. 3. I found out that doing some simple meditative exercises and practicing some forms of mindfulness actually ease many of my triggers. They're so easy and also helpful in many other aspects of my life that I still to this day do them despite being in the clear. 4. I'd pretty much consider myself to be IBS free. Well, I haven't experienced any of those awful IBS symptoms that are commonly associated with this crippling condition for well over a year. I've learned that there are ways to beat it and minimize the risk of having an episode again. And now that I've made those necessary and very easy tweaks in the way I live, my quality of life is so much better. Empowerment and control are just two words I'd use to describe what this simple program has given me. And obviously, because everything has a knock-on effect, I feel more relaxed, less anxious, and much happier. Here's to being IBS-free now and the rest of my life. The truth about IBS. Once you go through Julissa's step-by-step plan, you'll quickly see and understand that there are more triggers and secondary triggers than what research tells us. It's about understanding your body and your environment. Each person is different. But as well as triggers, there are other factors that contribute to IBS, which, in a way I guess, could be classified as triggers as well. Your gut's flora, its ability to chemically break down food, and intestinal and gut muscle spasms are all pieces of the bigger puzzle. So, what's it all about? This thorough and well laid out step-by-step plan addresses the physical and emotional triggers and the possible medical explanations of IBS. I found the program easy to follow, and because of it, I am now a happy and healthy person once more. A clear-cut diet, explicit instructions how to eliminate and reintroduce food, exercises, supplement advice, and additional information about alternative therapies are what makes this step-by-step plan more useful and valuable than anything else I've read, including advice I received from doctors. Because, let's face it, all the doctors I'd ever spoken to said that I could never get rid of my IBS. And how wrong they were. Because I never suffer from it anymore. Here's the thing. To make it work, you've got to follow it. No cutting corners, no nonsense. But it works. I'm forever grateful for the advice I received from Julissa that day. She reached out at the right time when I needed help the most, when I felt like I was losing control. I followed the step-by-step program and her advice down to a T, and even in week 1, I began to notice differences. I feel like a whole new person, mentally and physically, and I'm happy to report I am currently IBS-free, and I have been for some time, and I credit it all to this amazingly informative plan. Although I do consider my IBS gone, I still follow the plan. I consider it to be my Bible. My diet is on point. The exercises have become a regular part of my daily life. I supplement with vitamin D, turmeric, and magnesium, and I've never felt happier and healthier. Not only am I back working, I've also managed to land a position I love. My friendships are back on track, and I've even found happiness in love as well. Okay, so this program isn't magic in the fact it will find you a new romance or rekindle friendships, but it will point you in the direction you need and give you all the necessary information. One thing I can vouch for is that it definitely worked for me. Over to you. If you suffer from IBS, whether it's a mild form or chronic, I know you're not 100% happy. I also know that you've been suffering from pain and discomfort. The thing about this step-by-step plan is, it is so incredibly easy to follow, like super easy. I didn't need to buy anything new. No expensive diet foods, no gym memberships or equipment, no expensive experimental drugs. Nothing. The best thing is I don't have to spend endless hours in doctors' surgeries or hospitals waiting for answers anymore. I'm proud to say that I haven't stepped into a doctor's office for almost a year and a half, which is quite a feat for somebody that had once frequented every family practice in the locale on a regular basis. The exercises I did and still do at home, sometimes when I have a moment, I also do them at work because they're that short and that easy. And when I have to travel for work, I often find myself doing them on the plane. They're great because I can incorporate them into my everyday life with ease without any disruption. I've learned to change my lifestyle. I continue to follow all the instructions because by doing this, I know that I'll be able to maintain a life free of IBS and its crippling symptoms. Click below to get your easy-to-follow step-by-step program today. Nothing to lose. What have you got to lose by trying this method out, other than your awful IBS symptoms and unhappiness? Even in my desperation, I was a little skeptical of it all, especially since I tried and failed so many other methods, and no doctor I'd visited could help me like I'd hoped they would. This clear program isn't made up from nothing. It's based on scientific, factual evidence concerning the triggers of IBS. It's an easy-to-follow plan, and because it's so easy, it's not that difficult to include in your life and make the necessary tweaks in the way you live. And if you're anything like me, once you start noticing the differences, you'll become determined to make it work for you and continue with the program well after the suggested time is up. Julissa's program is different to the rest. It's so simple. It's easy to follow, and it also offers some step-by-step instructions. What makes this plan even more unique is that it looks at IBS holistically. It looks at every aspect of IBS and all its triggers. From there, everything is separated into manageable chunks, which make it easy and even fun to follow. Trust me when I say you won't live to regret this. I hope that you too can find all the answers for your IBS you're looking for, just like I did. Here's to living IBS-free forever. You're 90 seconds away from owning a program designed to make things right for you. Click the order link below, and it's yours. P.S. I really hope that you can find some relief from this awful condition like I have. But if for some reason you aren't satisfied with your outcome, Julissa offers a 60-day money-back guarantee, no questions asked. However, I'm almost certain you'll never need to use this guarantee. Believe me, I've never been happier and healthier in all my life.